Dr. Mehler coming at you with more bad news. I finally caught up with the first 3 weeks of journals, and I was hoping this weekend to post some excerpts. It's 8:30 in the morning on Sunday, October the 10th, and I'm getting busy so that maybe you'll have a glimpse at the journals this week and get everything out. But one thing I wanted to comment on was the almost universal sense that your lives had been seriously disrupted, that you lost your last year of high school, your first year of college. And it got me thinking of what I've lost from the pandemic. And I mentioned already early on that I've been teaching here at Ferris for 30 years, but everything has changed, and I don't know how to effectively teach anymore, especially with these new tools. In the old days, I would come into class and entertain you with videos and all sorts of nonsense. My classes were generally confusing because I wanted to get people thinking. And you only think when you don't understand something, when you have to turn something over in your head. The general principle here is that thinking only takes place in the present moment, and it only takes place in the face of a question that you don't have an answer to. If I ask you how much is 2 plus 2, you don't think it's 4, you just know it. It's something that you learned. And there's a big difference between learning and thinking. So the main thing that I loved doing was uh, getting students thinking and walking in and just off the top of my head. I considered a class a success if I felt good after, if it made me happy. And half the students loved what I did and half the students hated what I did. But my goal was to to be happy myself. And I think overall, if you rate my professor, you'll see that I'm kind of middling, certainly nothing there to brag about, but not terrible either. At any rate, after this semester is over, I'm going to have one more year, 2 more semesters before I retire. So you people got stuck with a tired old man trying to keep up. I've been apologizing regularly since the beginning of this semester. But in the beginning, uh, it's the beginning of a new week, and that's what Sunday is for Jews. It's certainly the beginning of my work week. Um, I have to get all your assignments and videos and quizzes together today, so this is a busy day for me. And I thought that I would start off by making a few remarks about some thoughts that arose from last week's work, and I'm going to share this with my 122 and my 251 classes because I think it's relevant to both classes. First, this was mentioned before, but this is a book, Prohibition. It's called The War on Alcohol by Lisa McGurr. I have, this is, I've been in the business for a while, so these are 2 other really good books on alcohol prohibition. I've done a lot of reading on prohibition in general, alcohol prohibition, marijuana prohibition. So, and Eric Foner actually, in one of his little short clips, summarized the book and got me thinking about it. It takes a bit of an imagination for you to really think about our government trying to control us in this blunt of fashion. Now that cannabis prohibition is on its way out and we've got a dozen provision stores in town, it's really hard for us to imagine these efforts to deny us intoxicants would ever be reimposed. I mean, what are the chances of a constitutional amendment banning alcohol now? Right here in Big Rapids, we ended the ban on Sunday sales of alcohol a couple of years ago. When you think about the old law, which governed most of my life here in Big Rapids, I could not go and buy alcohol on Sunday because some Christians were in church and they didn't like the idea of me boozing it up while they were praying. That's all gone now. You can buy alcohol now on Sunday morning, but and it's obvious that those laws came out of a Protestant Christian orientation. But what was really important about prohibition comes to light when you realize that it was the beginning of the prison industrial complex. The United States imprisons more people at least in the West, so never mind China. God help us with China, but outside China, I think the United States is probably the second largest prison state in the world. We imprison a larger percentage of our population. Millions of Americans go through our prison system, and that system was created beginning with Prohibition. You realize that that we suddenly made criminals. We created criminals with this law. You realize that, for example, if we would pass laws making the smoking of tobacco and the sale of tobacco completely illegal, what we would do is we would create millions of criminals. So all those people who smoke tobacco would suddenly be criminals now. And that's what Prohibition did. And so the first thing to realize is that people were being sent to prison. It wasn't just anybody randomly being sent to prison. There was a real focus here on immigrants, Mexicans, Blacks, and poor whites in the Appalachian Mountains. They would trek up to these backwoods hillbillies who had a still for their own consumption, or maybe they sold to neighbors, whatever. And those are the people they had to go and bust. So it was really a war against people, against minorities and poor. So the first thing to realize is that the people being sent to prison were immigrants, Mexicans, Blacks, and poor whites. In my History 251 class, we're reading Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and she rightly points out that the war on drugs was really a war on Black people, especially young Black men, who are the victims of the war, and along with the felony convictions and years in prison, most of them lost their right to vote. In fact, felony conviction, you can legally be discriminated against, just like you could back in the days of Jim Crow when you didn't have constitutional protections. No one will hire you and you can't get any kind of government assistance. But it really isn't new. Middle and upper class whites could drink alcohol without fear of being arrested. Enforcement was really vigorous and resulted in a vast increase of policing, including the origins of the FBI, were focused on people of color, poor people, and poor whites. It shouldn't come as a surprise that the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover, which was established in the Prohibition era, was a thoroughly racist institution. I had a friend, Charles Allen Jr., Google him, Charles Allen Jr. journalist or Charles Allen Jr. Nazi, and the second hit will be my archive here at Ferris. I've posted the only available recording of Chuck giving a talk on Klaus Barbie, the Nazi Gestapo head of Lyon, France, smuggled out of Europe with the help of American intelligence. Chuck wrote the story of the Rat Line, an operation run by the precursor of the CIA that brought Nazi criminals to the USA. This is one of the little books that he published, Nazi War Criminals in America, Facts in Action. He really was a pioneer of that journalism. So he broke this story about the Rat Line, which was an operation run by the CIA that brought Nazi criminals to the United States. Then, when they were here in the United States, the FBI protected them so that when Chuck started doing his research, J. Edgar Hoover sent out a secret memo to his agents identifying Chuck as a dangerous radical whose work needs to be subject to surveillance. We didn't know it at the time, but all of Chuck's mail and phone was surveilled. Later on in life, he did a Freedom of Information Act search, and he found virtually they had a whole archive. Everything that he had ever gotten in the mail, they had a copy of. So that was a lesson, one of the lessons that brought me to the view that I have of the United States and of the place of racism within the United States. And so I just wanted to leave it there, a few words to get you started thinking this week, and I'll leave it there.